Disinherited for Dad's new wife, her kids took it all. Now they're ruined, and I'm loving it. My name is Daniel. I'm 25. And let me tell you something. When I was 18, my father, Robert, decided I was no longer his precious little son. You know what he did? Yeah, he erased me from his damn life. Why? All because of Lisa, his new beloved, who was 20 years younger. For some reason, he decided that her two teenage sons, Ryan and Nathan, were the very picture of angels. Those guys became his new favorites, like they were some golden boys sent from heaven to revive his family empire. I remember that day down to the smallest detail, as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting in my crappy apartment, staring at a letter from a lawyer, which said in plain black and white that everything that once belonged to my family now belonged to Lisa and her kids. Our house, that fancy villa with a view of the city. Dad handed over his business too, the profitable company that should have been mine by rights. And all his bank accounts, yep, were signed over to the new family too. Dad didn't even try to hide his disdain. He once told me I was not ambitious enough to carry on his business. Sure, Dad, because I wasn't born with a silver spoon like your new favorites. He loved to brag that Lisa and her sons were the future of the family, while I was just a mistake, like some kind of error in his master plan. So that was that. One day, I just packed my stuff and left. It felt like a scene from a cheap drama. Me standing on the doorstep of our house, hearing Lisa laughing with my father, while Ryan and Nathan lounged lazily on the couch, as if it had always been their home. At that moment, I felt betrayed by everyone I had trusted. But there was something else, a hard, cold feeling inside. I knew this wasn't the end. I wasn't about to leave it at that. My father thought I was a loser, that I'd never amount to anything. Oh, how wrong he was. I left that house empty-handed, but with a solid determination to come back and get revenge for all that hypocrisy. And yeah, spoiler alert, I succeeded. Lisa and her golden boys, Ryan and Nathan, quickly got comfortable in their new roles as the royal family. They were living it up, throwing money around like they owned an island. Lisa immediately took over Dad's wallet and got to work. Fancy cars, brands I can't even pronounce, and of course, endless parties at our former mansion. Dad played the role of the rich fool, ready to sponsor any whim of his new wife and her perfect sons. And me? I was left with empty pockets and one clear thought. All right, the game's not over yet. Dad deleted me from his life as easily as you'd delete an annoying ad. No calls, no texts. It was like he'd put a huge period on our relationship and moved on to the next chapter of his perfect life. Well, good luck to him. While Lisa hosted another lavish event with champagne and caviar, I was working 2 jobs and eating instant noodles. From morning to night, I worked at a car wash, and at night, I did deliveries. I looked at those faceless office buildings and thought, buddy, one day this is gonna change. Oh yeah, I was determined, even when my body refused to move from exhaustion. And soon, Ryan and Nathan adapted to their new status as golden children. They wore suits that cost as much as my monthly salary, and their favorite hobby became showing off new purchases, from fancy gadgets to the latest sports car. How are they gonna pay for all these toys when the money runs out? I thought, but I kept my mouth shut, watching the show from a safe distance. The picture was complete with endless parties, attended by anyone who could afford to get the taste of that luxury. I had to watch it all through my phone screen, scrolling through their fake smiles and phony fun. But here's what they didn't know. I was playing a game too, only my moves were far less visible and way more calculated. Yeah, life was tough. Sleepless nights, working until I was dead tired, then waking up and doing it all over again. But you know what? I liked it. In every delivery I made and every car I washed, I saw a chance. A chance to prove to all these perfect hypocrites that they were wrong. Lisa pulled a real magician's trick. A wave of her well-manicured hand, and Dad, like a mesmerized rabbit, handed her full control over the business. It's amazing how someone can lose their mind over a shiny smile and a pair of new shoes. She manipulated him like a puppet, whispering in his ear about new opportunities and modern approaches, though her idea of business was just to burn through money. Ryan and Nathan, those two fools, took on the roles of the main advisors. Obviously, they had no clue how to manage anything bigger than their own pocket change. They started draining money from the company like kids grabbing candy from a store, spending it on expensive clubs, new cars, and yacht trips they couldn't even afford. Dad? He was totally under their spell, trusting everything they said and not wanting to hear otherwise. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started gathering evidence, because it was obvious the whole thing was headed for a spectacular collapse. Every major withdrawal, every shady contract, and all those expensive business trips that were really just booze-fueled parties. I collected all of it like a real detective, leaving a trail and noting every mistake they made. But Dad wouldn't even look my way. It was like I had become invisible, one of those people long erased from the family photo album. Then one day, Ryan and Nathan pulled a real stunt. They managed to steal the family heirlooms, Grandma's earrings, Grandpa's ring, and other antique stuff that had always been in the family. Why? To cover debts. Their debt was growing like a bubble about to burst, but the two of them didn't want to admit that their golden life had hit a dead end. Of course, no one in the company suspected what was happening behind the scenes. The money always seemed to disappear, and there was no one to blame. Rumors started spreading. Dad's old friends whispered that the company, once stable and thriving, was headed downhill. People were quitting, clients were leaving, but Dad ignored all the signs, blinded by Lisa's promises of a new beginning. And me? I watched this fantastic show from a distance and quietly collected every piece of information. I was waiting for my moment to lay all my cards on the table. But the worst part was seeing how Dad was slowly turning into a shadow of himself. He, once confident and powerful, became a puppet in the hands of this manipulator, and I could only watch as his life crumbled. "Buddy, this is just the beginning," I thought to myself, listening to Lisa give him another tip on how to invest properly. As I predicted, it was a complete disaster. Dad's business started collapsing like a house of cards in the wind. Lisa and her useless sons were on a rampage. They weren't just bleeding the company dry, they were making decisions so idiotic they could be called financial suicides. And yet, they acted like they knew how business worked. I might have laughed if it wasn't my family at stake. Debts started growing so fast they seemed to be aiming for a record in how to ruin a company the fastest. The new real estate they bragged about became like a ball and chain. Within a couple of years, all those fancy apartments and office buildings were repossessed for non-payment. Ryan and Nathan, who not long ago were cruising in expensive cars and partying at elite venues, suddenly became a lot quieter. It was hilarious to watch them try to hide their panic behind forced smiles while everything was falling apart. Then one day, I happened to run into one of Dad's old friends. He recognized me right away and didn't miss the chance to fill me in on the latest gossip. Turns out Lisa, in a desperate attempt to keep things afloat, was planning to sell off whatever was left. Well, of course, it was obvious. When everything went downhill, she decided to offload the assets to cut the debts. Everything that had once belonged to our family, she was planning to sell like cheap merchandise at a garage sale. I knew this was my chance to get back in the game. It was time to make my move. I used a fake name and started buying up the assets Lisa had put on the market. She didn't even suspect that her own tricks were working against her. I secretly bought up everything at rock-bottom prices, like a predator patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. Every deal was hidden so cleverly that neither Lisa nor her business geniuses noticed anything. They were so busy trying to save the remnants of their pathetic kingdom that they didn't realize someone on the inside was getting closer and closer, and let's be honest, I enjoyed every moment of it. The downfall of the perfect family came like the final note in a miserable opera. The debts reached such a critical point that even Lisa, with her gold watches and diamond earrings, couldn't pretend everything was under control. Her luxury kingdom crumbled, and she was forced to declare bankruptcy. Dad, my dear, naive dad, was furious. He stormed around the house, yelling at Lisa, blaming her for destroying his life, his business, and everything else. "How could you let this happen to us?" he shouted. But it was too late, buddy. The show was over. Ryan and Nathan, those two cowardly rats, bolted the moment things got hot. They left their mommy to face the creditors alone, like they suddenly had more important things to do. And Lisa, stripped of all her power and former confidence, was visibly falling apart. Well, all that was left for me was to take advantage of the moment and deliver the final, decisive blow. I knew there would be a creditors' meeting to finalize the company's fate and what was left of the assets. So there I was, in a crisp suit, with an expression that said, "Well, how's it going, guys?" I waited in the hallway as everyone gathered, holding back a smile at the sight of these so-called businessmen who had just lost everything. When Lisa walked into the room, she looked like a beaten dog. She wasn't expecting to see me there. When I stepped in, she turned pale. You'd think she'd seen a ghost. "Daniel?" Her voice was shaking like someone who just realized they'd been caught in a trap. I didn't drag out the pause, just shrugged and calmly started explaining. I laid everything out. How her reckless spending, cheap tricks, and constant manipulations led them to ruin. I said it without a hint of malice, just with cold, hard calm. You thought you could run our business and our family however you wanted? Well, as you can see, Lisa, everything turned out exactly as I predicted, I added, savoring every moment. Dad stood next to her, silent, but his face said more than words could. In his eyes, there was hatred, disappointment, and, surprisingly, something that looked like an admission of guilt. He finally realized he had let all this happen, that he trusted Lisa and her sons, turning his back on me. Lisa couldn't take it and tried to say something in her defense. Her face flushed, and her voice faltered. I just gave a calm smile and walked away, leaving her and Dad to face reality. Everything they had built on lies and pretense collapsed, and I was the one who watched their downfall with pleasure. Taking full control of the business was, honestly, even easier than I expected. Once Lisa and her beloved perfect boys had destroyed everything they could, I used my reclaimed assets to rebuild the company and get it back on its feet. All those worthless deals they'd made played right into my hands. I became the sole owner of the business that should have been mine all along. But now, it wasn't just my inheritance. It was my kingdom. Lisa? She was left with nothing. No more fancy mansions, no more champagne parties, no more luxury shopping sprees. The house they had once proudly shown off to everyone now belonged to me. I turned it into my headquarters, setting up an office with panoramic windows in the living room, so I could enjoy the view they lost every single day. Honestly, it was a damn sweet revenge. Dad? He vanished, like anyone who realizes they've made a massive mistake. He went into complete seclusion, cut off all contact, and no one's seen him. All I know is he tried to make excuses to a few old friends, but nobody believed him anymore. Everyone knew he was to blame for turning his life into ruins when he trusted Lisa and her kids. Watching Lisa and her princes try to find jobs was a real show. They ran around the city like lost puppies, but no one wanted anything to do with them. Lisa's reputation as a manipulator who drove a successful business into the ground followed her like a shadow. Ryan and Nathan, who were used to easy money and endless parties, now looked pathetic and lost. They desperately tried to get any kind of job, but even the simplest ones were out of reach. Tough luck, boys, I thought, enjoying their downfall. Yes, I savored every moment of my newfound success. The company thrived, and I sat in my new office, overlooking the city where I used to be nobody. Now, I could afford everything I'd never even dreamed of. And Lisa? She was left out in the cold, losing everything she once thought was hers. She and her sons became real outcasts, stripped of all the perks they got from my father. Watching this unfold was like seeing a play I had directed myself. It was a lesson on how quickly you can lose everything if you build your castles on lies and illusions. Now that life has finally turned around, I lived the way I wanted. The company I now owned rose from the ashes like a phoenix and started thriving faster than ever. Money was pouring in, and I enjoyed no longer being that poor guy who used to haul boxes and dream of the slightest stability. No, now I was in control, and let's be honest, I liked it. I bought myself a luxurious penthouse downtown with panoramic windows that looked out at the very mansion that used to belong to my family. In every glass of expensive whiskey, in every purchase I made without checking the price tag, I felt triumph. You know, it's a strange feeling. When you no longer need to explain yourself to anyone and you just do what you want because you can. Dad, as I expected, tried to get in touch at some point. He sent a few messages, apologizing for all his mistakes, saying he wanted to make amends, that we're family and all that. I read every word with a cold smile on my face, then simply ignored it. Buddy, family ended the moment he decided Lisa and her kids were more important than me. My door was permanently closed to him. As for Ryan and Nathan, they eventually tried to come back to the city. Oh, how funny it was to watch their pathetic attempts to rejoin the old circle of friends and acquaintances. But here's the thing. Everyone who used to hang out with them didn't even want to see them on the horizon. Those golden boys now looked broken and lost, like two teenagers who realized too late that they weren't playing by the rules. With their reputation in ruins, they became the town's outcasts. And Lisa? Her downfall was even sadder than her son's. Once the queen of luxury and excess, she now worked at some cheap cafe on the outskirts of town, serving coffee and sandwiches to tired workers. I saw her a couple of times, pale, worn out, with that look of someone who knows there's no going back. It was like someone had taken off all her Instagram filters, and now she saw herself for who she really was. Pity? Sympathy? Don't even think about it. I felt nothing for them except cold satisfaction. They got exactly what they deserved. Ryan, Nathan, and Lisa, they all became a living example of what happens when you build your future on someone else's ruins. I didn't need to actively seek revenge. They drove themselves to ruin, and I watched each fall with pleasure. Life finally showed who had been right from the very beginning. Now, I'm a successful businessman who rose from the very bottom, and I'm doing it with such style that everyone around watches with their mouths wide open. The business they tried to destroy, I not only rebuilt, but turned into an empire. Those who used to look down on me now try to figure out how I managed to rise so quickly and confidently. Well, that's their problem. Lisa and her kids, those former kings of life, now live in obscurity, trying to find the slightest remnants of their former glory. They're just the remains of a broken family, who lost everything they once thought was theirs. For them, it was a harsh lesson, and although I should feel nothing, to be honest, I enjoy the fact that their story ended exactly as it should have, with complete ruin. Life put them back in their place, and I was the one who got to watch the finale from the front row. Every evening, when the workday ended, I sat in my new fancy office, surrounded by glass walls and views of the city. On my desk was an old family photo with my mother in it. I looked at it and understood that despite all the darkness, I had finally found justice. My mother had always believed in me, and now, looking at that photo, I felt I had lived up to her hopes. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how it all turned out. Let me think. No, not at all. This story is about how mistakes and greed can lead to total collapse. And I'm living proof that even if you've been rejected, humiliated, and thrown overboard, you can still come back and claim what's yours. You just have to be willing to go all the way, without fear of being ruthless and unethical when necessary. So yeah, it was a tough journey, full of pain and betrayal. But you know what? I made it. I won. And now I have everything I ever dreamed of, while those who stood in my way are nothing but shadows from the past. They're gone from my life, just like any regrets.